Welcome to our web exclusive. I'm Mike Montecalvo along with Eyewitness News analyst Lieutenant General Reginald Centracchio. General, we're finding out new details tonight about airport security across the country. There is a new report that just came out that shows a gaping hole in security. We're going to talk about Green Airport and some of the things they're doing right. But for example, Newark Airport took a hit with this report. Basically, it's about tracking some of the different weapons that have been smuggled into the airports.
Exactly. I think it has to do with the reporting system. I think they have a myriad of different categories as it relates to different kinds of things that have compromised the system. As an example, if a knife is found, they may categorize it in one particular place as a breach of security, but they won't say what it was. And the intent of this whole report is to look at a central capability to be able to share particular incidents across the nation and to all of our airports, looking at particular trends. That's not in place right now.
I always thought after 9/11, even though they found, let's say, a knife and they don't explain what it is, it was supposed to be done that way. I thought that was the protocol from the very beginning.
That was the intent. That was the whole purpose of having TSA be the overall umbrella. But apparently over the several years, different things have changed and people are not following protocol as it was set up with the intent of making sure if a breach of security took place at Newark, it would be obviously promulgated across the country. That didn't happen.
All right, Newark was singled out in this report, basically saying that they're not doing a very good job there. For example, a knife passed through security that you're mentioning, but the other thing that they looked at was apparently a dead dog made its way past security. And on the outset, you look at it, how could they not know about the dead dog? But they could be smuggling in something within that body.
That's the major concern that I would look at. When you have a dead body, number one, totally out of the question where you not recognize that somehow. But when you look at, and it didn't get screened, that's the overlying major security breach as far as I'm concerned. Within the cavity of that dog, there could have been explosives, and certainly could have been biological agents that were implanted within that body. Both of those were not even looked at. So you look at that and you say, well, there's a major, as far as I'm concerned, major breach in security by just assuming something that it's a dead dog. It could be a lot more than that.
The other thing too is if you look at busy airports, most of us have been to an airport in the last 10, 15 years, and you look at the lines. Some lines move pretty fast and some get clogged up. The ones that move pretty fast are the ones sometimes if you're trying to smuggle something through, you're not going to be going through that line.
You're right on. And I think we have not seen an effort by several people at the same time trying to leverage that busyness, if you will, where you can set off some kind of an incident that would take the majority of interest to that particular gate or that particular screening point. Something else could be happening here. When you have an awful lot of people coming into the same point, that's a very real possibility, and you're right on to say that could be an area that needs to be looked at.
Now, we talked about Newark having problems. On the flip side, Green Airport, I guess, passes when you really think about it. A week or so ago, someone, obviously he was not found guilty, but weapons were smuggled into stuffed animals, and they eventually found that, and they reported it to the TSA. But that person was able to get back on the plane, though. That's a separate issue.
It is, and I think when you look at it in retrospect, so the guy was found to be either framed or was having some kind of a domestic problem. That's all well and good for the immediacy of that particular incident. But when the people on the plane see that same individual who was picked up and apprehended, so to speak, by TSA, and then allowed to get on the plane, that's not sending out a good message, in my opinion.
One of the things they did do, though, is they told everyone what was in the stuffed animals, so that went across. So that's something different than Newark, not mentioning that there was a knife being smuggled in.
Exactly, yeah. But I think in this particular case, they did everything by the book, did report it accordingly. But I'm surprised, even after knowing the full story now, that they allowed him to get back on that plane. Because the people didn't really know the background at that particular point, and I'm sure there was some concern there.
So what's the next step for the TSA?
TSA needs to pull in its umbrella capability to look at the reporting system itself. The entire reporting system was designed to be able to share information and to make sure trends are not developing, and especially as it relates to things that we just take for granted, such as, who would think you'd put a pistol or a part of a gun in a teddy bear? That's so simple a thing. We're looking for more exotic things such as bombs in a shoe or bombs on someone's underwear, or perhaps in the cavity of a human being. All those things are so complex, you can't ever forget that most simplistic aspect will be the area where we get compromised.
All right, General, moving on, $500 billion in automatic cuts to the military is going to happen over the next 10 years. I guess they're looking at October 1st for a date. How does that affect facilities as opposed to weapons?
It could affect it, in my opinion, probably very significantly as it relates to Rhode Island. You know, in Rhode Island, in the past several years, we've been involved in major construction projects, not only at the Newport Navy base, but certainly the Rhode Island National Guard at Quonset, Fogarty, and many other places across the state. Those programs are designed to go out as much as 5 years. You apply for it, and you don't see it for 5 years out, where it actually starts to happen. If this budget goes through, I would think that many of the construction projects that were scheduled to happen in out-year fiscal years will not happen, because the $10 billion will be across the board, and they're not selective at which ones would.
So that wouldn't affect like C-130s or anything like that?
Well, they would affect C-130s, but not in Rhode Island. The C-130 fleet in Rhode Island is pretty well okay, and the reason for that is the state-of-the-art CJ-130 CJs, which is a stretch model. Those states that have the smaller ones and not modern would certainly be subjected to not continuing to be in the fleet, and that would be, I think that would be a target for certain takedown.
You know, General, we know the cuts are going to happen. It's just, it's a fact of life. Where do you want to see at least that some of the cuts can take place and then have them leave something else alone?
They cannot touch it. If they go to personnel and they go to entitlements and benefits, that would probably have more of an impact on our readiness than taking out a particular weapon system. Weapon systems can always be brought back in the event that we get into some major conflict. But if you destroy the personnel readiness of an organization, that would be devastating, and that would be a hard thing to recover from.
How quick can you get the weapon system back in place?
Well, it's a matter of just keeping up the design, what you want to see as an end result, and putting it back in the system and having the contractor take it from there. A lot easier than trying to recruit a brand new person, train them up, and get them qualified, combat ready to go to war.
You're finding some safety problems on the F-22s?
Yeah, F-22 apparently has had some safety problems as it relates to the oxygen capability for the pilots. So they brought NASA into it to determine whether, in fact, they should go back to the old system about having canisters available to be able to give oxygen to the pilots. Or the existing system would be to be able to scrub oxygen out of existing air. I'm not quite familiar with the complexity of the system, but it's so basic a system that you would think in a F-22, which is a state-of-the-art fighter, those simple problems should not exist.
And finally, General, the Army is announcing numerous job cuts in combat positions. How will that affect the whole game plan?
Well, job cuts in reference to the numbers of combat positions across the board, it's being tested to allow female to occupy combat positions in 9 brigades across the country, ranging from artillery, tanks, and those kinds of things where you wouldn't normally associate female being able to go into a combat position. And this is relatively brand new in reference to saying, well, we're going to allow females to go in direct combat. And I think that would be, I think what I'm seeing is a pretty significant move for the military.
Well, how does that fly with male soldiers at that point?
Well, I think, you know, they trust them as long as they can do the job. We've not seen any big conflicts over the years since female were allowed in the military to begin with. If they're competent, we do have a trust. I'm more concerned about whether the American people are ready to see female coming home in body bags. And I hope I'm not being crude about this, but nevertheless, that's a true test. That's a litmus test about what our society will allow, what they'll expect, and what they'll expect from the military. When you see female being subjected to the same kinds of things that in direct combat, I'm not sure that the United States is ready for that yet.
Well, the reality check, General, is we're in the middle of May, and I think 16 soldiers have been killed in Iraq and Afghanistan just in the first couple of weeks. Yeah. So that's kind of reality there.
Yeah, that's right. I'm not sure how many of those were female. Probably none. When you allow direct combat and you allow hand-to-hand and direct proximity of your enemy, female, male, that's a different thing. They could be very well capable of doing that job, but if they don't do it and they're killed in that action, that will be whether in fact we continue with allowing female to be in direct combat positions.
All right, General Centracchio, as always, thank you for your thoughts.
Good to be here.
Thanks for watching.